Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Councillor Tony Page and I'm the Mayor of Reading, and I chair these council meetings, and I'd like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be available for repeat viewing on the council's webcasting site. Can I at this stage call on the Leader of the Council, Councillor Brock, to say a few words about our late colleague Colette Dennis before we then stand for a minute's silence. Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All of us will be aware that Councillor Colette Dennis, the member for Norcote Ward, passed away suddenly and unexpectedly on Friday the 9th of June. Colette was first elected in May 2022 and was re-elected in May this year. And in a short space of time, she had a tremendous and positive impact on Norcote and on the lives of residents. She was a wonderful ward councillor and an active member of the community in Norcote, quite especially around Dee Park, the Decaf Community Cafe, at the Norcote Mission Church and its lunch club, and at the Oak Tree Care Home. Indeed, I'm aware that Colette is much missed by a great many in the Dee Park community especially. Throughout her work on the council, she always displayed compassion, commitment, and an insatiable spirit to stand up for her residents and challenge any inequities that she saw. She showed a particular interest in the council's adult social care and children's services and had just been appointed chair of the Older People's Working Group. All of us would want, I think, to be remembered as champions of our local communities and neighbourhoods. Colette achieved that accolade in a short period, and I'm very proud of the contribution that she made to her community and to our council, and we will all miss her very greatly. Losing a colleague so suddenly is a great shock, and I know that Colette was a good friend to very many of us. I have heard publicly and privately a great many tributes to her from members of all of the political groups here tonight. So I know that she will be dearly missed not only by the Labour group, but right across the chamber and indeed by officers of the council also. Finally, Mr. Mayor, my thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of everyone here tonight, are with her husband, Councillor Glenn Dennis, and with Colette's family and friends, and my heart continues to go out to them all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brock. Could I ask colleagues to stand for a minute's silence? Thank you very much. Glenn had indicated to me that he wanted to say a few words. He's not with us this evening online, but I don't know if he's actually online. No, he hasn't joined. Okay. Right, in which case we will move on. I've got a couple of other announcements to make to colleagues in respect of two awards that Reading Borough Council has secured within the last month. Firstly, we were successful in the Local Government Chronicle Awards in the Diversity and Inclusion category, building inclusive access to learning, culture and leisure in Reading, and that was at the beginning of this month. and the citation referred to Reading's culture and leisure team demonstrating a very impressive and comprehensive approach to transforming their services with an explicit focus on including all parts of the community and across every protected characteristic. The outcome focus of the transformation and the integration of equality and diversity activity is matched with resources and a self-evident, enthusiastic and passionate leadership, which also recognise the need to go even further. And that award will be displayed in the civic officers' cabinets out the front. And the second award last Friday, which I was pleased to attend along with Councillor Rowland, was for the Municipal Journal, from the Municipal Journal, where we won the Best Council Services team, and we were up against 7 other authorities. In fact, the 8 nominees in this category were the largest number of any of the 20 awards, and the citation said that this was a hugely ambitious and innovative project, improving over 500 roads with more in the pipeline. Reading have shown how a structured, proactive approach can both reduce long-term costs whilst being climate conscious. A great team who go the extra mile to improve their roads. And that was the Municipal Journal Award, which will also go on display. So congratulations to all our staff and colleagues who've worked so hard to deliver those 2 splendid awards. So that ends the announcements. So if we can then proceed, we've had apologies from Councillor Azari and obviously Councillor Dennis. Declarations of interest, are there any? Nope. Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of May, which was the annual council meeting, which I remember well, and I'm sure other colleagues do. Can we agree those minutes? Agreed. Good. I can sign those. Thank you. Petitions, none received. No public questions either, which takes us straight on to the 3 councillor questions that we've received. The first of which is from Councillor Robinson to the lead member for Climate Strategy and Transport. Councillor Robinson, are you plugged in or switched on or 2 now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the imminent initial construction phase of more than 220 homes on the former land of Reading Golf Club in Emma Green, and the continuing, indeed increasing concerns amongst the nearby residents living in Kidmore End Road and the surrounding area over what they believe will be inevitable safety and heavy congestion issues arising from the construction traffic, Emma Green Ward councillors are this evening asking council to do all within its power to minimise such problems, not least by working with the developers Vistry to reconsider the development's proposed construction traffic routing. At the planning applications meeting held on the 29th of March, there was a request by myself to defer the agreement of the development's construction method statement, my request being based on no agreement having been made over how traffic would safely travel to and from the site. My request, however, was refused, although we as local councillors were promised that we would be kept fully informed and included in the discussions that would directly affect our residents. To date, the only correspondence that ward councillors have seen is from being copied into emails between the council leader, Councillor Brock, and Helen Lambert from Cadra, who also remains highly concerned over what plans are being made to facilitate safe travel to and from the site. This is not what local ward councillors expected or were promised. So far, following contact between Transport Development Control and Vistry, we understand that only a TTRO has been proposed for Kidmore End Road. one which would remove available parking during the day and create a small passing place in an already very narrow road. From the correspondence we have seen, officers accept that the TTRO will only be simply managing the area most likely to be affected. This is not good enough, nor apparently has any further consideration been given to having construction vehicles come into and out of the area on a one-way circuit, something which would at least halve the traffic flow coming from both directions into Kidmore End Road. Council will not need reminding that this administration's decision to grant planning permission last year was a highly contentious one, with more than 4,000 objections received. Residents in Emma Green remain extremely worried about what is shortly to begin literally on their doorsteps. So the Emma Green ward councillors are asking council a three-part question. Please update us on what recent decisions have been made, if any. Will officers now actively work with developers to consider the imposition of a one-way circuit route on construction traffic? And please explain to the ward councillors why we have not been contacted by the relevant teams in RBS and RBC so that we can advise our residents accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Robinson, for your question. Since the application to discharge the CMS condition was discussed, at the Planning Applications Meeting Committee on the 29th of March 2023. Highway officers have been in frequent dialogue with the developer Vistry Homes. They have been trying to seek ways to minimise the impact of the construction works on local residents as much as possible, particularly in relation to the TTRO. The developer has also an interest regarding congestion surrounding the site, as this could have a significant impact on their deliveries and as such have a detrimental impact on the programme of development. The extent of the TTRO, however, has only recently been confirmed between highway officers and Vistry Homes, and this forms part of their updated construction method statement. This version was issued to ward councillors on the 20th of June 2023 for their review comment as agreed at the Planning Applications Committee. The introduction of the passing place is considered by officers to be the best approach to mitigate the potential increase in congestion, given that any physical traffic control can only be undertaken by way of the temporary traffic lights or stop and go boards. Both methods are likely to have a far greater impact on congestion within the vicinity of the site, as they would require multi-phasing of the said method of control, therefore increasing any delays. Therefore, in relation to the three specific questions, I respond as follows. Number one, no decisions have been made to date with the construction method statement, with the latest draft being issued to ward councillors on the 20th of June 2023 for their review comments. Number two, neither the highway or planning authority have the power to impose specific routes on the developer, hence why a one-way route cannot be stipulated. It can, however, be advised that through discussion with the developer, the construction method statement does now include the option of utilising other routes to and or from the site to ease congestion on Kidmore End Road. This is something that can be reviewed during the development. Number three, ward councillors have not been contacted until this point, given that the details of the TTRO and the construction method statement have only just progressed to a point at which officers and Vistry Homes are in agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson, do you have a supplementary? And can I just remind colleagues that the purposes of supplementaries are to clarify a reply to a question and not to introduce a fresh question. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Mr. Mayor, may I thank Councillor Ennis for his comprehensive response to my question this evening. As a supplementary, I would like to ask the lead councillor whether the TTRO will now be put on hold, not implemented until such a time as it is needed, if it is needed at all. Discussions have been held with Vistry, proposing a much more acceptable route for traffic to travel in and out of the site. So we are waiting on their say-so that they are happy to move forward with that. And as a result,
Robinson,
yeah,
Councillor, a supplementary.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you made your point.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Ennis has understood. Councillor Ennis?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am unable to give you a comprehensive and full answer on your supplementary question. If you wish to put the question in writing through councillors' inquiries, the formal route, and copy me in, I will be happy to follow that through with traffic officers and discuss that and come back to you. Thank you.
Okay, if we could move to question 2, which is Councillor Magan to ask the lead councillor for climate strategy and transport.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Green councillors have welcomed the completion of the new swimming pool and leisure centre in East Reading at Palmer Park, opening in December of last year. One of the important contributions to reducing carbon emissions are the 11 electric vehicle charge points in the car park. 6 months after opening, these still aren't live. Could the lead councillor responsible please update us on why not and when residents and visitors will be able to charge their electric vehicles in Palmer Park, and clarify whether this is the responsibility of the leisure centre or the council? Thank you.
Councillor Ennis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for Councillor Magan for the question. It's great to hear that Green councillors welcome the opening of Palmer Park Leisure Centre and pool, despite the fact that Green councillors have consistently voted against building the pool. I suppose Labour councillors know what residents want far better than the Greens do, and you're happy to play catch up now. We are expecting the EV charger points to become live at the end of July, which is later than we had hoped. Throughout the build process at Palmer Park Swimming Pool and Stadium, GLL and Pelican, like many other construction organisations, have had to deal with numerous supply and cost pressures. Despite that, together, we have delivered a fantastic new centre to BREEAM excellent standards, including solar PV generation, additional air source heat pumps, upgraded building controls, and many other measures, all contributing to a significantly lowered carbon emissions. We now have a facility, as you would agree, that is excellent in terms of quality and services available and environmental impact, in line with the council's response to the climate emergency. The opening of the charging points represents the last of the planned developments at the centre. Thank you.
Councillor Magan, do you have a supplementary?
No, I don't, but thank you for that clarification. It's great news that it's coming soon.
Which takes us on to the third question from Councillor McElroy, also to Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Mayor. Very busy night, Councillor Ennis. Multiple companies such as CityFibre, Grain and BT have been repeatedly digging up the same roads and parks, sometimes with complete disregard for the amenity of conservation areas, to install their own internet cables for private gain. Please can the lead councillor update me on what the council is doing to minimise disruption? Since this has been going on over multiple years, why has the council still not become a permit authority to give it more control over these roadworks? Thank you.
Councillor Ennis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor McElroy, for your question. It's an important one. I thank Councillor McElroy for his question, as it's written down here. As I am sure Councillor McElroy is aware that there is a national government drive initiative to increase the rollout of super fast telecommunication networks across the country, and funding is being provided to stimulate the industry into delivering this infrastructure. Telecommunications is an area that is considered of national economic importance, and the increase of home working, voice over internet, taking over from the copper-wired landline telephones, video and music streaming, and other content-rich websites is driving the need to future-proof these networks and provide ever faster telecommunication services. As statutory undertakers, CityFibre, GrainConnect, BT Openreach and others have powers to lay and maintain apparatus within the public highway. We do not have jurisdiction to refuse or stop these works from taking place and must facilitate and aid coordination around other planned works events on the network as best as possible to minimise disruption for all users of the public highway. Where possible, we will always encourage utilities to work collaboratively to minimise disruption. The introduction of a permit scheme is a significant undertaking and requires many pre-processes to be undertaken. Consultation with stakeholders impacted, including statutory undertakers and neighbouring local authorities, and application for a regulatory change. It is a journey that Reading will be undertaking, and work on this will commence later in 2023 with delivery and roll-up next financial year. The street works teams will continue to coordinate all works on the public highway using the street manager system, which continues to provide a good control mechanism for the enormous demand on the public highway road space within Reading. Thank you.
Councillor McElroy, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, it's not written down, but I do thank Councillor Ennis for his reply. Yes, supplementary. In terms of the roll-up for next financial year, does that mean we wouldn't expect enforcement on this issue until 24-25? Is that what you're saying?
I cannot answer that question and give you a full and honest, comprehensive answer. If you would like to put the question in writing through councillors' inquiries, and you do know a lot, Councillor White certainly knows about councillors' inquiries, and copy me in, I will only be too happy to make sure and follow up the answer. Thank you.
And that concludes questions from councillors and takes us on to item 7, which is the first of 3 resolutions. Councillor Moore to move the. Councillor Moore, I thought. Oh, right, fine, right. Councillor Moore. Where are you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to be able to propose this motion to colleagues. According to the last census, approximately 38,000 people live in Reading who were not born in the UK. All of these people call Reading their home and bring significant value to our town. They contribute to the local economy, pay taxes and take part in their local communities. They also use public services which they pay for but do not get a say in how they are run. After the UK left the European Union, EU citizens with pre-settled or settled status will still be able to vote, but it still means that others with existing lawful immigration status and those who move here in the future will not have voting rights in local elections. This unfortunately creates an unequal situation where some non-UK citizens have the right to vote, but others do not. Voter turnout in local elections in Reading was as low as 24% in some wards in May, and having further complexity in voting eligibility will continue to cause confusion and reduce voter turnout amongst migrant voters, a group already having a disproportionately lower voter registration rate than British voters. Scotland and Wales and their devolved assemblies have already implemented residence-based voting rights, and the London Assembly passed a motion in favour of residence-based voting rights. Both the leaders of the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party have called for all EU nationals to be given full voting rights in the UK. I would therefore like to call on all parties to support this motion to indicate we agree with restoring voting equity to our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second, and just to say a few words, I'd like to thank Councillor Moore and his group for bringing forward this motion. I don't think there's really very much to add to all the detail that he's put in here, but just to say, you know, we pride ourselves in Reading as being a welcoming town and a town of inclusion. And actually people often talk about that when they're asked. They say how everyone gets on well living together and how we, you know, the richness of our diversity. So it feels really out of odds that we have a situation here where some of our residents are simply excluded who lost the franchise because, you know, that's just not the way it should be. I think our home, our vote really is the right thing to say. And so we welcome that this is bringing forward and we will be supporting this motion as I'm seconding it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Briefly from me too, I'd like to thank our friends in the Lib Dems and in the Labour group for seconding this. I agree completely. I can't see Councillor Terry, but I'm going to shift slightly to my side. I agree completely with Councillor Terry. I'll just say a couple of words. And we're really happy to support this. Anyone legally resident should be legally registered to vote. We're proud to welcome people to Reading from all across the world. We can't put up a sign that says welcome to Reading, but you're not welcome to vote. You're not welcome to our democracy. They all are. And this policy will just bring us in line with Wales and Scotland where it already exists. And if it's working there, it'll work here. So we're very happy in the Green Group and proud to support this motion and our residents and encourage everyone to vote as well. Vote for a better future for all of us in Reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Moore for this motion. And I fully understand the concerns and confusion Councillor Moore refers to, yet have to remind him that our relationship with the many countries of the EU changed when Brexit became a reality. And this is a sad consequence of that decision. On a personal level, I admit to being a Remainer and voted to stay in the EU as I felt it was better to fight from within, and was indeed disappointed in the result of the referendum. But in a democracy, we have to accept the will of the majority. Whilst I have a certain degree of sympathy with this motion, I feel that the action requested in A is a little unrealistic in that we as a council are seemingly asking for a change in the law which will affect England and Northern Ireland and would be viewed as contrary to the many Brexit voters and what they expect. Surely such a request would be better served coming from the Liberal Democrat MPs in the Commons and likewise Labour MPs. I certainly have no issues with the recommended action for B and C. However, given the recommendation in A, sadly, I will be abstaining from this vote, and I believe the same for our party. Thank you.
I haven't seen any other indications to speak. So, Councillor Moore, do you want to wind up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Terry and the Labour Group for seconding this motion. I appreciate the collaboration there, and for the Green Group as well for their kind words. And I think we, as three parties, are in agreement that these people call Reading their home, and they contribute so much to our town. We even have EU residents in this room right now, looking at you, Councillor Lanzoni. So it's a shame that the Conservative group are not supporting this, but I suspected as much. This isn't about Brexit. This is just something that happens. Commonwealth citizens have the right to vote, so I don't see why other people who contribute towards our local community shouldn't have the right to vote either. So what a shame, but I'm very glad to commend this motion to the Chamber. Thank you.
Can I see all those in favour of the motion? Any against? Abstentions? That motion is clearly carried, which takes us on to the next motion on the Thames Water Sewerage Network. Councillor Cross to move.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to propose this motion, which is calling for action on a serious issue that is facing our town and the wider country. A while ago, when I was cycling through South Reading, I noticed a terrible stench coming from the Kennet right next to Kennet Island. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but Thames Water's online map helpfully indicated that it was from a discharge of raw sewage the previous night. Such incidents have become much too frequent. Indeed, Thames Water has been responsible for thousands of cases of sewage discharge every year, with millions of tonnes of raw sewage ending up in the River Thames. They've been hit with numerous multi-million-pound fines, but seemingly to no avail. When the water industry was privatised in 1989, we were promised cheaper bills and much needed private investment in infrastructure. Yet quite the reverse seems to have happened, with customers' bills rising by over 40% and around £70 billion being extracted from the sector as dividends, while sewers crumble, pipes are left to leak, and our country's rivers and streams are some of the worst in Europe for pollution with human waste. Thames Water has consistently failed to get a grip when it comes to discharges. They've had chance after chance, yet things seem to be going backwards, not forwards. Even the chief executive of Thames Water, Sarah Bentley, admits that there's been, quote, decades of underinvestment by her company. She hit the headlines recently for her £1.6 million salary. Clearly, executive remuneration is one aspect of the business which hasn't seen decades of underinvestment, but instead rewards for failure. I should actually say ex-CEO, as she unexpectedly resigned this afternoon. Maybe she'd read the text of this motion. I hope we can all agree that it is wrong that residents should have to pick up the tab for Thames Water's failures, whether as bill payers or through the tax system, when water companies have paid more than enough to shareholders via dividends over the years to carry out the necessary works. A report by the University of Greenwich found that water companies could have afforded to finance all their operations and investments without taking on any debt at all. Instead, evidence suggests their debt taking was driven by overly high dividends. The cost of the constantly growing debt is then passed on directly to consumers in the form of higher bills. The Financial Times, which is not known for its left-wing outlook, recently noted that since privatisation, the water companies, which were sold off with no debt and handed £1.5 billion, have borrowed £53 billion. Much of that has been used not for new investment, but instead to pay £72 billion in dividends. It's fair to say, I think, that water companies have been more interested in maximising profits, not managing our water network. I've talked about sewage discharges. There's also the issue of water leaks. I remember quite some years ago, Thames Water ran an extensive PR campaign around its efforts to repair Victorian water mains, yet the issue of leaks is actually getting worse, not better. Just last week, it was reported that their level of leaks was at its highest in 5 years, with 630 million litres being lost every day. And that's to say nothing of the cost to local businesses from the numerous road closures caused by sewer collapses and pipe failures, which I'm sure colleagues will want to mention in more detail in the debate. Mr. Mayor, our residents deserve the right to enjoy our local environment without encountering the stench of human waste and to swim in our rivers without risking serious illness from raw sewage. Thames Water needs to get a grip on these issues, and we as a council must continue to play our part in pressing for action. I urge colleagues to vote in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Councillor Hornsby-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was younger, I swam in the river without even thinking about it. But now, I wouldn't dream of doing it now. Our rivers have become residues of sewage overspills, and that's as a result of decaying and inadequate infrastructure and a culture of greed in which a profit of £398 million over 6 months was made last year by Thames Water. In 2021, there were over 1,600 hours of discharge around the Reading area, sewage discharge into our rivers, with untold harm to the ecosystems and the wildlife in our local rivers and water streams. Now, colleagues in Caversham can talk about their particular local issues there, but I've had several meetings with Thames Water reps in the last few months. In my ward, Church Ward, one of our residents experienced repeatedly not being able to get through on an emergency helpline over a flood of sewage, raw sewage, going through her garden. She was being told, eventually when she managed to get through, that an engineer was on their way. Untrue. She was given repeatedly wrong times when the engineer would turn up. The engineer did not turn up. In all, she waited 51 hours before the engineer turned up to unblock the sewer in her garden. Not only that, but it strained her health with the stress. She was later hospitalised with a liver infection normally caused by bacteria in faeces. She lost her job. Now she is being told by Thames Water that she must use her own house insurance to get her garden cleaned, which of course now that she's lost her job, she cannot afford. Now in our meetings with Councillor Page and myself met with Thames Water, we were also talked about collapsed sewers and the poor management of diversion routes in Church Ward. It's important that they are held to account. I want to know how they have upgraded their crisis line so people know where they are in the queue. This lady did not. I want to know where their reported 1.25 billion investment is going, over what time period, and the effect that it will have on our water streams. And it's not just me. This is something that we all have a responsibility to deliver to the residents of Reading who demand a better service. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hornsby-Smith. I've got Councillor Yeo next and then Councillor Hacker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support this motion and echo the previous comments. Over the past 3 weeks, it would be difficult to miss that the centre of Caversham was shut due to Thames Water Works to repair a collapsed underground sewer in Church Street. This is not the first time in recent months that Caversham has had structural repairs to the sewage and water network. This has affected local residents and businesses in a number of ways. Residents have been forced to use the residential roads, unused to the increased amount of traffic diverted onto them. Businesses have suffered, as this has effectively said to Caversham, don't drive to Caversham because you will not be able to get here easily. Whilst this may have made it quieter in the centre of Caversham for those residents and visitors that have been able to shop and actually get to the area, it's been too quiet. And it's affecting businesses' ability to operate as they do rely on regular visitors from outside the area. So as councillors in Caversham, we've received numerous comments about the effect this has had. We would like to support this motion to ask Thames Wards to come to the SEP committee to explain why this has happened and keeps happening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hacker and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I saw this motion was coming to council today, I was very pleased to see it. Even more so today when we see that Sarah Bentley has resigned from Thames Water. But if you read the article on the BBC page, you'll see that a school had to cancel a field trip because there was so much sewage in the water they were going to be sampling. They couldn't go ahead. They couldn't do it. One of my favourite things to do in my my A-level geography and in my degree was kick sampling. You'd go out to a local waterway, a stream or a river you could get into without getting too wet. And you'd kick away at the gravel, you'd catch the bugs as they went downstream and you'd have a look and see what you could find, all of which indicators of how healthy that water system was. It does make you wonder if these children had been able to get into the river and sample it, if they'd have found anything at all, because the way Thames Water treat our water systems is quite frankly disgusting. It really does show that privatisation of the water industry has entirely failed. We see dividends being paid out, we see massive bonuses being paid out, all the while our residents are being failed, our businesses are being failed, and very importantly, our environment and aquatic environment and ecosystems are being failed. We need to remember that although we are people and we can build things and drive cars, essentially we are part of a massive ecosystem, and it's our responsibility to make sure that that ecosystem remains healthy. When I was finishing my degree at university, my dissertation was on the effects of pollution on water fleas, Daphnia, which are the very bottom of the food chain, so to speak. So what, 22 odd years ago, we knew about these things were happening. We knew pollution was affecting our ecosystems and destroying them. But in those 20 odd years, very little has happened, apart from people have got rich off the back of the water industries. So I absolutely, completely, wholeheartedly support this motion, but I would love if we could just sneak in the end where it says, for the benefit of both residents and businesses, we also put in our environment.
Thank you, Councillor Hacker. Councillor Moore, then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading is obviously well known for having waterways, and we are affected by these directly. We have the River Thames, the Kennet and Avon Canal, and the Holybrook. So this really affects us in Reading, wherever this takes place, up and down the water system. I think the resignation of the CEO, excuse the pun, but it's a watershed moment for the scandal-ridden company. Thames Water is a mess, complete mess. And I think it's high time the ministers step in to reform the firm from top to bottom. The days of profit before the environment must end. And I think it's time for a conversation about whether we should have water companies run for profit when there is no competition available to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Eden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Cross for his motion on the Thames Water Sewerage Network. I find myself in the strange situation of accepting and agreeing with all of the comments and all of the speeches made so far. The state of our water and sewage networks, where raw sewage is constantly being fed into our rivers, seas and waterways when the system can't cope, is simply not acceptable. Likewise, the management of our sewage network infrastructure. This needs to be vastly improved. Councillor Cross and others have rightly pointed out the collapsed sewer in Church Road, which caused major inconvenience and severely impacted the centre of Caversham, affecting residents and businesses when it was closed for emergency repairs. In this day and age, we should be expecting proactive action from our water companies to reduce failures, not reactive when things have already gone wrong. Thames Water, I think we all agree, needs to do much better. It needs to put the environment and its customers first, and this means investing significantly in its infrastructure. I and my colleagues will be backing this motion and the recommended action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Eden, then Councillor Keeping.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to apologise in advance to Councillor Robinson because some of what I say he may not be able to agree with. I'm sure he'll agree with the first part of what I say, however, which is that caring for our water supply should be a serious responsibility, not used as a cash machine. Too often, Thames Water have treated their custody of our water supply simply as a profiteering opportunity. Now, the national press has quite understandably focused on the impact on coastal communities, but here in Reading, as colleagues have already said, we do not have to look that far afield and wait for our summer holidays to see and smell the impact. Others have mentioned the sewage discharge that affects rivers across our town. And of course, that particularly affects those of us that represent South Reading, where we are fortunate to have some particularly special sites of biodiversity. Whitley is also, as we all know, home to the sewage works. And this modern facility was promised to be one that made the Whitley WIF simply a memory. Indeed, for years, this was actually the case. However, as we all know from experience in the council, a new facility does require ongoing investment to keep it up to date. This is not complex or controversial, but it does require a responsible organisation that takes the basic care to operate as a good neighbour. Over the last few years, our residents in South Reading, across Whitley, have been forced to make increasing complaints due to the increasing issues related to the operation of the sewage works. Some of this is so basic that saying they should have fixed the roof when the sun was shining is not a metaphor. I would like to place on record the thanks of the Whitley Ward councillors to the council's environmental health team for their persistence in supporting residents on this. And I would note that residents are continuing to use their influence as citizens. However, residents and public services should not be required to cajole, persuade and negotiate with a private utility. The staff's union should not be raising the alarm about the consequences of underinvestment. The current government's relaxed, at best, approach to regulation of this key utility, unfortunately, means that is what we're having to do. I would hope that the tail end of this increasingly tawdry Tory government would act and salvage some kind of positive legacy here. However, if they don't, as residents, in the next 18 months, we have the opportunity to elect a government that will. The Labour Party is determined to rise to this challenge and gain the trust of residents. If we succeed, the owners of Thames Water should be on notice. You have been ignoring residents and your own staff. You've been failing to invest, and so far you have not been facing the consequences. It's time to step up. It's time to come and show themselves responsible and accountable in public and do the basic work that a responsible organisation should do. As councillors, I know that South Reading colleagues will continue to press for enforcement action now. And a Labour government in the not too distant future will be forced to take action.
Thank you, Councillor Eden. Councillor Keeping.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support this motion. I've got sympathy for those in Caversham affected by the recent sewer collapse and all the detours, delays and difficulties that came as a consequence. In Kentwood Ward, residents have also experienced more than a fair share of sewer collapses over recent years, and in particular around the Armour Road and Armour Hill area, where there have been a number of collapses at various times. Whilst the effects on traffic there were more limited than in Caversham, it is exasperating when repairs are made in a reactive manner and then adjacent untreated sections collapse in short order. I'm very keen to see Thames Water take questions from councillors at the next meeting of the Strategic Environment, Transport and Planning Committee, and will be voting for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Keeping. Councillor McElroy.
Thank you, Mayor. It was only a couple of years ago that I was swimming in the Holy Brook. Probably wasn't a good idea then, certainly isn't a good idea now. The sewage leaking into our waterways, as I think we've heard from everyone, is clearly disgusting and appalling. Sadly, this motion quietly removes some of the teeth from the eerily similar motion recently put forward by Greens in Oxford. In particular, it leaves out writing to Ofwat and lobbying for a publicly owned water sector. I guess this is unsurprising given that Labour recently backflipped on their pledge to nationalise water. The council didn't get much out of Thames Water when they tried this in 2014 and 2017, and it certainly doesn't seem to have had much effect when we were talking to City Fibre not that long ago, so my expectations are low. However, this is a good chance to make Thames Water feel uncomfortable over their grim failures in this regard, so Greens will be supporting this motion, hoping that Labour, both Reading and nationally, has a plan B for if/when Thames Water ignores the good councillors of SEPT.
Thank you, Councillor McElroy. I don't see any other indications to speak, so Councillor Cross, would you like to wind up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank colleagues from all sides for their contributions to the debate, and I welcome the cross-party consensus, particularly from the Conservative Party. However, I would ask that they use their good offices to put pressure on their party colleagues in Westminster to take robust action to stop sewage dumping, in particular the 300-odd Tory MPs who recently voted down an amendment to stop water companies dumping sewage in our rivers. Yeah, there were some shocking stories from members, particularly Councillor Hornsby-Smith, and I really do hope that Thames Water is taking heed of the comments made tonight. I look forward to the opportunity of scrutinising Thames Water on these issues at a future meeting of SEPT as committee chair, and I know that many colleagues will look forward to that too. Mr. Mayor, I now request that we move to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Can I see all those in favour of the motion? I think that's unanimous. Any abstentions or no? It's unanimous. Which takes us on to item 9, the final motion on digital infrastructure. Councillor Keeping to move.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proposing this motion to deal with an issue that is probably not well known to a lot of people. Builders of large developments have been able to write into contracts with property buyers exclusivity clauses in the terms of sale with respect to provision of broadband. This allows them to then monopolise the communications market for the residents and drive them into exclusive deals, which does nothing to protect the consumer from price fixing. I'm frankly amazed that the Tory government, which is always championing the merits of a free market, have not taken more action to address this situation. Although this exclusivity has enabled many residents to obtain full fibre to the property provision, this anti-competitive strategy is hardly in the long-term best interests of those residents. Also, if the developer's own network penetration is great, then this discourages other providers from installing infrastructure, as their returns on investment will take longer to be realised. In addition, rivals seeking to deploy such fibre to the property on such developments may have to do so through the Access to Infrastructure Regulations 2016, which in some cases have been known to create costly barriers and may not align to the way that such networks conduct their rollouts, i.e. both cost and practical deployment barriers can be an issue. The government had the opportunity to fix this in a review started in 2020, but they only tinkered around the edges of the regulations because the regulations were helping them with their claim to be making the UK a global leader in digital connectivity. Having a robust and fast connection is all very well if you can afford to connect to it, and the current practice is not helping residents in this regard. My motion, if passed, will commit the Council to exploring the best possible policy framework to prevent exclusivity arrangements from affecting future developments which would ultimately benefit residents of our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keeping. Councillor Laing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion and reserve my right.
Okay, then Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will keep this short and sweet. It may sound like deja vu, but firstly, thank you, Councillor Keeping, for bringing this motion to full council. As with the previous motion, I fully accept everything Councillor Keeping is proposing. In my opinion, it's fundamentally wrong to deprive people or businesses of choice when it comes to selecting providers. It goes against competition. So I am all in favour of any principles or directives that help stamp out what are clearly unfair practices. And Councillor Eden, it's good to have you back, and no offence taken from your comments in the last one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Always a pleasure to be in the chambers with you year on year. And I would like to thank my fellow ward councillor, Mark Keeping, for proposing this motion, and congratulations for your first motion. Mr. Mayor, I would like to draw your attention on the Conservative government already published connectivity requirements for new home on 31st of January 2023, to give you the date. And they made an amendment to the Building Act Regulations 2022, which came into force on 26 December 2022, which introduced gigabit broadband infrastructure and connectivity requirements for the constructions of new homes in England. This applies to the erection of the new dwellings or part of buildings that contains one or more dwellings. And the developer needs to submit building regulations approval to meet this requirement. To help reduce the cost for developers, the Conservative government has secured commitments from the network operators to contribute towards the cost incurred, and to work with the network providers from early stages of the planning of their development on non-exclusive basis during the construction phase. This is to reduce delays in connecting to existing network, reduce lead-in times if the existing networks requires capacity upgrades to serve the development. Maybe Labour councillors like to read section which deals with this requirement, Part R of Schedule 1 to the Building Requirement 2010, before you start bashing the Conservative government. While we reinvent the wheel in this chamber, what is already done in the Westminster, I would also request the councillors to look at not to take the responsibilities what is the Westminster the MPs are doing in the Westminsters. While we ask and instruct the officers to add instruct them to look at the policy framework, we also need to consider their workloads and not ask them to reinvent the wheel and increase their workload. We also will be instructing the chief operating officer to write to the government, and I know the response. They will write back saying, read section which deals with this requirement part R schedule 1 to the building regulation to 2010. In principle, we support this, but as usual, low expectations, and thank you for opportunity to let me speak.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are going to be supporting this motion, and thank you, Councillor Keeping, for bringing this to our attention. My particular interest is in the quality of the internet access across the town. Considering that Reading is a major town, our internet access is actually really quite poor. And we've gone from being, well, for quite some time, it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And I'm particularly thinking of people who are in Coley, who I support, who have had to have their smart meters switched off because their internet access is so poor. Connections are rubbish. I mean, how can that be? And again, it's just another example of a real sort of lack of joined up thinking. So yes, absolutely, we will support this, and let's sort of keep pushing for good quality and affordable internet access across our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Keeping for this motion. I think this ties in actually quite well with Councillor Cross's motion about talking about another situation where people are not given choice about who provides a service. And I think it's just like with water companies. This is a shocking situation where essentially a developer is locking people into something which may be rubbish. It may be a rubbish company. It might provide rubbish internet, and they also have no incentive to provide a good service because they know they're going to get someone's business. So I think this is actually something that needs to be tackled, and the Lib Dem group will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Lang, nobody else has indicated. Do you want to exercise your right?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the update, Mr. Singh. I mean, it's Councillor Singh. I'm not really interested in secondary legislation. That hasn't really come to the fore yet. And I will read a quote from the Minister where it says, the government encourages all infrastructure operators in all sectors to work together on new solutions. This will facilitate greater benefits and easier access, and so helping to reduce costs to and environmental impacts of the deployment. It's all about encouraging people to work together. There's no legislation. There isn't. It's not backed up. Ofcom, who are meant to be backing up this, and I quote, right, Ofcom can resolve disputes and impose injunctions in relation to sharing infrastructure and such like. It's linked to what Councillor Keeping said earlier, yet they are not able to find an operator in breach of regulations for failing to provide access or failure to even engage with the request for access. So it's to do with the local plan. So I am going to, if you don't mind, we've got 2 pages of it. I've just cut a little bit off the end. So sit back, relax, and we'll go with this. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Keeping, for bringing this motion and highlighting this issue. This council resolves to instruct officers to explore the implementation of an open access principle still for digital infrastructure providers on all new build developments in Reading as part of the forthcoming update of the local plan, going to Secretary of State on November 24, and I do hope it's Lisa and Andy that it goes to. Our local plan is on track with dedicated officers working on it already. Yeah, with some 43 policy reviews. If this passes tonight, it'll be 44. Currently, this is the faith they have. We have 55 local authorities who have abandoned their housing targets. That's according to the Daily Fail. 19 authorities have abandoned already updating their local plans. So much for the update of the national planning framework. Tonight, again, we can see it's local government, us, RBC. This is blue councils, red councils, the occasional green council, and a mixture of the lot of local government, again, through the planning process, having to find solutions to problems caused at a national level, in part by a government unwilling to regulate against unfair business practices. So an open access policy conditioned to applications in principle, this would still allow developers to provide information around costing and raise any viability issues on individual plans, both being fair to the applicant and protecting the residents from what is a restricted practice agreement to the customer. The condition through planning is enforceable. Yours isn't secondary legislation. We have a government more concerned with protecting the profits of big business than they are with protecting the consumers and residents. It's a general theme with the public too, and we see it plainly with the previous motion about Thames Water, which you supported. We on this side believe in a fairly regulated market that is both fair to business and the consumer. So that's where it is. Normally, I would ask colleagues to support this motion, but they really should support this motion. Right, back to Councillor Keeping.
Thank you, Councillor Leng. Councillor Keeping, do you want to wind up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I get the microphone working, yeah. Thank you across the chamber for your broad support on this. That's good to see. I was a little bit surprised by Councillor Singh's assertion that there will be a big workload consequence as a result of this. I don't believe that to be the case. I think a policy change is not that much of an issue. But yeah, very glad to see the support. Thank you to Councillor Leng for his seconding, and propose it goes to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Keeping. Can I see all those in favour of the motion? No, I think that's unanimous. Good, and that concludes this evening's business. Thank you very much for being such an agreeable group tonight. George?